Hello everyone and welcome back to the EDH Jank Center, your source for everything Commander and everything Jank. I am your host, Jordan, or Prairies, you can call me either, and today we have a very fun deck list for you today. It is Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes. I am so excited. This is a wall and spider tribal deck, and we will get into that in a second. But before we do that, I'd like to talk price. Normally here at the Jank Center, we like to keep things under budget. We like to build budget decks just to help you guys and your wallets and highlight cards that normally wouldn't get the chance to shine. However, this deck ended up running about $67, and that is without basic lands. But what's cool is the deck list is down in the description, so you can take a look, make cuts that might help with your budget or your specific specs. And that's just the great fun of deck building, is it not? Is making your own specific tweaks, bringing your own personality to the deck. That being said, $67 is not too bad, and we've got a lot of really cool fun cards in here that I'm really excited to show you guys, so let's get it started. So today our generals are Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes, 2 red and green legendary planeswalker Minsc from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. When Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes enters the battlefield, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you may create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. His +1 ability is put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste, and his -2 is sacrifice a creature. When you do, Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes deals X damage to any target, where X is that creature's power. If the sacrifice creature was a hamster, draw X cards. Minsc and Boo Timeless Heroes can be your commander, and he starts at 3 loyalty. So the core strategy of this deck is going tall. We are going to be building up 1 or 2 or maybe 3 big creatures using Minsc and Boo's and maybe other effects to sacrifice the creature and deal damage to our opponents, hopefully copying that ability and yada yada. However, our planeswalker is super integral to our strategy and thus needs to be fully protected by what? Spiders and walls, baby. There are obviously way better ways to probably protect this guy, but I didn't think about those, okay? I wanted to do this. I love spiders and I love walls. They're very dumb and janky, and I've always wanted to make a deck, and this was my excuse, and I'll show you. I think they work really well. I'd argue that in Magic the Gathering, as a creature type, spiders are normally used defensively. They have big butts, meaning they have large toughness, and they typically have reach, which protects against flying creatures, which a lot of the times, at least when I'm playing planeswalkers, they fall victim to angel tokens, bird tokens, and what have you. And walls are, you know, walls. If you have any suggestions also on how I should better play defense, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. So yeah, hopefully this picture's becoming clearer and clearer as we go along. We're going to be using spiders and walls to build up a huge defense, while behind those defenses we buff up Minsc and Boo and start shooting down our opponents with lots and lots of damage. We can also get Boo and other creatures that we're buffing up in for combat as they get bigger and scarier, because Boo, for one, has trample. Say we get Boo to a 15 trample, no one's gonna really want to block that, and if they do, they're still taking damage. Then in second main, you can use the -2, sack Boo to deal 15 damage to someone or something. But that's it, that's enough dilly-dallying. Let's get into the nitty-gritty, shall we? Our first card today is Rasta of the Endless Web, 2 green legendary enchantment creature spider from Theros Beyond Death. It has reach. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach, and she's a 3/5. First of all, before we get into the strategy of everything, I have always loved this artwork. Sam Rowan absolutely smashed this idea of a mother of spiders. Oh, incredible. And on top of that, look at what she does. She is a 3/5 reach for 4 mana, so already great for our defenses. And then whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, we get a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. We're just going to be creating an army of defensemen. So anytime anyone casts Cultivate, 3 Visits, Murder, Brainstorm, any of the early game or late game instants or sorceries turn into more defense for our strategy. Any chance I get to put a Spider Mommy into a deck, I'm going to do it. I don't think those words have ever been said in that order before. Okay, moving on. Next up is a card I didn't even know existed until I was doing research for this deck. It's Mindbender Spores. 2 and a green, summon, which means creature, wall, flying. Whenever Mindbender Spores blocks any creature, put 4 fungus counters on that creature. During its controller's untap phase, remove a fungus counter from the creature. As long as the creature has any fungus counters on it, it does not untap during its controller's untap phase, and it's a 0/1, and it's originally from Mirage. This is why I love Magic. There is just such a huge huge amount of cards that have been printed that I'm still being surprised by new cards that come to light. I mean, this card is amazing defense. Whenever it blocks a creature, that creature won't be untapping for 4 turns. 4 turns, that's so good. It's got flying, so it blocks flying creatures, and it's a wall, so it's flavorful with our deck. I mean, this is literally the perfect card for this deck. But honestly, what I really love most about this is the ability itself will deter people from attacking you, or more importantly, attacking Minsc and Boo. Because let's face it, this card is a 0/1. It will most definitely be killed by pretty much everything. But that ability is going to make your opponents think, is it worth it to lose my creature for 4 turns? And unless you're really ahead in the game, I don't know that many opponents are going to risk that. Super bonus points if you can use Proliferate and keep the fungus counters going on all the creatures that ended up being blocked by Mindbender Spores. Speaking of Proliferate, next up we have Courage in Crisis. Courage in Crisis. 2 and a green, sorcery from War of the Spark. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then Proliferate, which means choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. So this card's pretty simple and straightforward. It's utilitarian in the deck. You can put a +1/+1 counter on Boo ideally, and then Proliferate, which means you can add a counter, a loyalty counter onto Minsc and Boo, another +1/+1 counter onto Boo and your other creatures that have them, and those spore counters from Mindbender Spores that I mentioned earlier. Because we do have some pricier cards in the list, I wanted to balance it out with a lot of budget options. This card is literally sense, synergizes with the deck, and yeah, I think that's all I really need to say. Let's move on to Mirror Box. 3 colorless artifact from Neon Dynasty Kamigawa. The legend rule doesn't apply to permanents you control. Each legendary creature you control gets +1/+1. Each non-token creature you control gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with the same name as that creature. So our commander creates a copy that is legendary of Boo at every upkeep, not just when it enters the battlefield. Now, typically that copy would have to be sacrificed because you can't have 2 of the same legendary permanents on the field at the same time. But in comes Mirror Box, fixing all of that for us. So now, with Mirror Box in play, the legend rule doesn't apply, which means every upkeep we're making a legendary 1/1 hamster named Boo. Well, technically non-legendary now. Now, this is good in the deck for a couple of reasons. You're making 1/1 tokens every upkeep with Trample and Haste. That's very good. And it buffs your legendary creatures, so now they're 2/2s when they come in. And as you beef them up, you can sacrifice multiple of them. Because they're hamsters, Minsc and Boo will draw you cards. It's just pretty good all around. All right, next up, we got Fling. 1 and a red, instant from Stronghold. Sacrifice a creature. Fling deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target creature or player. Something that I think is really important in commander deck building especially is redundancy. The idea of redundancy meaning if your commander does something, you should have things in the deck that mirror that kind of strategy, so that if people are targeting your commander, which they will, most play groups run a good amount of removal, so they will be doing that, you should still be able to play the game. That's why redundancy is super important. The way we deal damage in this deck is the -2 ability on Minsc and Boo, and if it's not on the field, we can't use it. That's why we include cards like Fling that do a similar job. And while Minsc and Boo's ability is free technically, Fling only costs 2 mana, it's instant speed, and trust me, it is more formidable and more sneaky than you think. I've been killed multiple times, courtesy of my friend Blaze, shout out to Blaze, by this card, and it's always out of nowhere. Also, almost every artwork of Fling is just absolutely fantastic, and why wouldn't I include it in the deck? Anyways, moving on. It's not a spider or a wall, but it comes pretty close to being both. It's Spider Silk Armor, 2 and a green enchantment from Mercadian Masks. Creatures you control get +0/+1 and may block as though they had flying. So basically, this gives our already thick spiders and walls even bigger butts, and it gives all of our creatures without reach, which makes flying creatures have an even more difficult time getting in for damage on our planeswalker. This also, flavor-wise, implies that Boo would end up wearing some form of really nice spider silk armor, or just be tall enough to block creatures with flying. Either way, I love the flavor, I love the ability, it's cheap, it's only 3 mana. The Artist Fire, I mean, it's a solid include. Speaking of spiders, we have Dragon Lair Spider up next. 2 double red, double green creature spider from Plane Chase. Reach. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a 1/1 green insect creature token onto the battlefield, and it's a 5/6. This has been a pet card of mine for so long, and I've finally found a good home for it. It's flavorful, it's a red and green spider, and the ability is so good. Whenever an opponent casts a spell that nets us one 1/1 green insect creature token, that begins to add up if someone doesn't check this spider. And honestly, if someone ends up destroying our main strategy, we might just have enough 1/1s lying around that we could just swing out and win the game anyways. And nice little synergy here with my aforementioned card, Spider Silk Armor. Each of these 1/1s that Dragonlair Spider creates will enter the battlefield as 1/2s with reach, making an entire army of thick defensive boys, and who doesn't love that? Alright, up next we got Paradox Zone, 4 and a green, enchantment from Commander 2021. Paradox Zone enters the battlefield with a growth counter on it. At the beginning of your end step, double the number of growth counters on Paradox Zone, then create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of growth counters on Paradox Zone. So this card goes bananas. I've talked about it previously on the channel in my Vorel of the Hulklade deck tech, and it's also great in this deck too. Again, it's this idea of redundancy, right? So this thing grows exponentially and creates tokens that get larger and larger and larger the longer the game progresses. So the turn it comes down, it'll make a 1/1, the next turn it'll create a 2/2, the next turn it'll create a 4/4, an 8/8, a 16/16, and so on and so forth. Where redundancy comes into play is this gives your opponents something else to worry about other than the gigantic hamster that we've been building the whole game. So they ice our commander, they ice our beloved little cutie hamster, they still got to deal with these gigantic fractal creatures. And at 70 cents, this does not hurt the wallet either. Hell yes, boys. All right, second to last card here is one of my favorites of the last couple years, Maskwood Nexus, 4 colorless artifact from Kaldheim. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. And you can pay 3 and tap it to create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter token with Changeling. Can you deduce why this card is in this deck? I'll give you a second. Yeah. We're going to turn everything into hamsters. So with Maskwood Nexus turning everything into hamsters, any creature we sacrifice with the -2 ability on our commander is going to draw us a ton of cards. It also makes Boo an eel, so that's cool. And that last ability isn't necessary for the deck, but it's always nice to have cards that do things. And in the spirit of doing things, what we are going to do now is the last card in the deck tech. And that card is Weathered Sentinels, 3 colorless artifact creature wall from New Capenna Commander. Defender, Vigilance, Reach, Trample. Weathered Sentinels can attack players who attacked you during their last turn as though it didn't have Defender. Whenever Weathered Sentinels attacks, it gets +3/+3 and gains Indestructible until end of turn, and it's a 2/5. I did not know of this card's existence until a couple weeks ago when I was making this deck list, and my god, it's so good. A 3-drop Defender, Vigilance, Reach, Trample, 2/5, and it gets Indestructible when it attacks, and it'll definitely attack because people are going to want to go after our Planeswalker and attack us? Bro. This is perfect for the deck. This is just perfect. It's a wall, so it's flavorful. It's got amazing keywords like Reach, Vigilance, and Trample, which means we can start putting +1/+1 counters on it with Minsc and Boo's first ability. If the circumstances arise and we do need to attack with it, it gains Indestructible and buffs itself, and it doesn't tap, so it can defend on the crackback. Bro! All right. I'm gonna stop there before I have to change pants. And just like that, we are at the end, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed this deck tech. I honestly think I might build it for my own personal collection. If you have any suggestions on how to make this deck better, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. I don't pretend to be an expert, and I love being surprised, so don't be shy. As always, the deck list is on Archidekt in the description below, and if you want to choose the next deck tech I do, consider joining the Patreon. There's lots of cool benefits for patrons, including monthly polls where I'm going to ask my patrons to choose my next deck tech video. The link to that is also down in the description. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.